Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight is about the latest report by Human Rights Watch on Israel as an apartheid state. Israel is engaging in apartheid against Palestinians. That is the conclusion of a 213-page report by international watchdog group Human Rights Watch. The group says that its conclusion is based on government documents and statements by public officials. It stated that the Israeli government perpetuates a system of apartheid with its intent to maintain the domination of Jewish Israelis over Palestinians across Israel and the occupied Palestinians' territory. The group added that this goes hand in hand with the systematic oppression of Palestinians as well as inhumane acts committed against them. Human Rights Watch said that these three elements occurring together amount to the crime of apartheid. The report comes only weeks after the International Criminal Court in The Hague announced that it was pursuing war crimes investigation against Israel. That probe is focusing, amongst other violations, on Israel's settlement activities in the West Bank. Palestinian Authority's President Mahmoud Abbas welcomed Human Rights Watch's report. Israel's foreign ministry rejected it, calling it preposterous and false. The United States, which sends billions of dollars in taxpayer-funded aid to Israel annually, has distanced itself from it. According to the Congressional Research Service, since World War II, Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign assistance. Human Rights Watch has called on nations to impose sanctions on Israel, including travel bans and asset freezes on those responsible for these crimes. The group also called on Palestinian Authority to cease cooperation with Israel to avoid being complicit with apartheid. About 6.8 million Jewish Israelis and 6.8 million Palestinians live in Israel and occupied Palestine. Human Rights Watch is the first major international organization to call Israel's treatment of Palestine apartheid. Earlier this year, B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, also called Israel an apartheid state. In 2006, former United States President Jimmy Carter titled his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. In it, he argued that Israel's continued control and construction of settlements have been the main obstacles to a comprehensive peace agreement in the Middle East. The United States Department of Homeland Security is launching an internal investigation of domestic violent extremism within its own ranks. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said senior department officials will be immediately beginning a comprehensive review of how to best prevent, detect, and respond to related threats within. He called domestic violent extremism the most lethal and persistent terrorism-related threat to America today. He added that hateful acts and violent extremism will not be tolerated within the department. In his first budget proposal unveiled this month, President Joe Biden called for funding to investigate any complaints of white supremacist belief at immigration enforcement agencies within the DHS. Mayorkas said that the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of then-President Donald Trump highlighted the threat of U.S.-based extremists. The Council on American Islamic Relations is calling on CNN to drop former Senator Rick Santorum as a commentator on the network. CAIR accused him of whitewashing the genocide of Native Americans. The Muslim Civil Rights Organization was referring to Santorum's remarks on CNN last Friday. Santorum claimed that modern-day America is a nation birthed from nothing and that there isn't much Native American culture in American culture. In 2019, World Economic Forum study found that between 1492, at the arrival of Christopher Columbus, and 1600, 90% of the indigenous population in the Americas died. This was due to mass genocide at the hands of Columbus and other European settlers, as well as sickness brought upon from Europe like smallpox, measles, and influenza. The death toll represented about 10% of the entire Earth's population at that time. About 3 in 10 healthcare professionals in the United States say they have considered leaving the profession due to burnout and stress since the pandemic started last year. This was the finding of a Washington Post Kaiser Family Foundation poll released on Thursday. The poll was created by Philadelphia based Muslim psychiatrist Mona Massoud. Her collaborative group is called Physicians Support Line. The survey of more than 1,300 healthcare workers also found that the youngest healthcare workers seem to have hit the hardest. Three-fourths of them reported worry or stress related to COVID 19 negatively affecting their mental health. 7 in 10 said they felt burnt out about work. Women in Saudi Arabia are advancing in education, employment, and entrepreneurship. Saudi women entrepreneurs are estimated to have over $11 billion in cash holdings. They also account for 39% of the total number of registered business owners in the kingdom. That is up from the 4% 10 years ago. Saudi Arabia has been advocating for female entrepreneurship in its national development plans for more than a decade. It's part of the country's strategy to encourage economic diversification and private sector investments beyond the oil industry. On the employment front, in a span of 2 years, the share of Saudi women in the labor market expanded by 64%. It increased from 20% in late 2018 to 33% by the end of 2020. Over 50% of university students in Saudi Arabia are women. Last week, the 8th Václav Havel Human Rights Prize was awarded to Saudi women's rights activist Loujain Al-Hatlol. It honored outstanding civil society action in defense of human rights. Al-Hatlol campaigned to end Saudi Arabia's male guardianship system as well as its ban on women's driving. She also advocated for greater protection for women facing abuse in the country. Al-Hatlol spent over 1,000 days in prison for her stance. She was released in February 2020, but is still under house arrest and other restrictions in Saudi Arabia. India has broken the global record for new COVID 19 cases for a sixth day in a row. Yesterday, the country's death toll reached 200,000. It has become the new epicenter of the pandemic. On Monday, the White House announced that the United States will share up to 60 million doses of the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine with other countries after they undergo a safety check. This process could take weeks or months. It's unclear how many of those doses will go to India, but the US is providing some badly needed raw material to the Serum Institute of India. This will allow it to scale up the production of AstraZeneca's vaccine there. Australian troops in Afghanistan have very likely committed war crimes. The Afghanistan Inquiry report that the Inspector General of Australian Defence Forces took 4 years to complete describes a warrior culture embraced by some members of the Australian military. The report alleged that patrol commanders required junior soldiers to shoot a prisoner to achieve a first kill. It also claims that troops planted weapons on slain Afghan civilians. The report recommends criminal investigations into 23 incidents involving 19 people. The document comes months after a military inquiry last November. It found credible evidence that soldiers had unlawfully killed 39 Afghan prisoners and civilians between 2005 and 2016. NASA said that in its third flight on Sunday, the experimental Mars helicopter Ingenuity flew further and faster than ever, including during test flights on Earth. NASA scientists packed away the vehicle on the Perseverance rover when it landed on Mars in February. Ingenuity unfolded and dropped from the rover about 3 weeks ago. NASA considered the helicopter a technology demonstration which is designed to test flight capability in the thin Martian atmosphere. The Ingenuity's team at Electric and Power Electronics lead is Palestinian Loe Al-Baisuni, who is from Beit Hunain, a city on the Gazan northern border. Al-Baisuni holds a bachelor's and master's degree in computers and electrical engineering from the University of Louisville in Kentucky. He joined a public aerospace company that offered him the opportunity to work on NASA with an experimental program to build the first aircraft to fly on Mars. The Perseverance helicopter evolved from the ideas, concept papers, and actual construction efforts of Lowy and his teammates. His Twitter handle is From Gaza to Mars. Hundreds of immigrants are drowning in the Mediterranean. This tragic loss of life is so routine that it hardly becomes news. Here is more by Ali Khalaf.
At least 100 migrants are feared to have drowned in the Mediterranean as a boat capsized. Merchant vessels and a charity ship found 10 bodies floating near a capsized rubber boat. The tragic incident took place near the northeast of the Libyan city of Tripoli. A storm with waves up to 6 meters high probably caused the accident. Humanitarian organization SOS Mediterranee noted that Malta and Italy did not help with the rescue mission. Last year, more than 2,200 people perished at sea. This raises the total number of those killed at sea to 17,000 since the year 2014, according to the United Nations. However, the true number is far likely higher. Since France and other Western powers shattered Libya with their bombings, the country has become a major route for migrants seeking to reach Europe.
It's time for our special Ramadan report. And tonight it's about kids and how they observe Ramadan. Children are exempt from fasting, but some children insist on fasting, and others celebrate Ramadan without partaking in fasting. Here's a report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
Muslims around the world love Ramadan. Each year, as Ramadan comes to a close, special songs of longing are in the air. But while Ramadan is still there, children have a special way of celebrating it. And even though children are exempt from fasting, they still love to fast. The very first fast of a young child is commonly celebrated as a special occasion in South Asia. Many families choose to throw a party to honor their children fasting for the first time. In Iraq and Arab Gulf countries, there is another tradition called Qarqi'an. Dressed up in traditional clothing, children must go from home to home asking for sweets. Qarqi'an takes place in the middle of Ramadan. The children sing special songs, pray for their neighbors, who in turn share sweets with them. This happens every Ramadan from the 13th to the 15th of the full moon. Although it may sound like Halloween, there is no scary part to Qarqi'an. Here in the El Zuberi district of Iraq, Qarqi'an kids are accompanied by young drummers and singers. Families load up with sweets in anticipation of the visiting children. Some parents also handcraft small bags for their kids to collect sweets.
After these reports, coming up next is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
So it's nothing extraordinary what we do. It's just a human to human, like brothers to brothers and sisters to sisters. Nothing else, nothing more.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Welcome back. In February, President Joe Biden announced that he was ending America's offensive support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. Instead, the U.S. role would be limited to defensive operations to support and help Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity and its people. On the other hand, critics argue that even the limited support the United States is providing still helps Riyadh carry out its offensive bombing campaign in Yemen. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Saleha Farouk. Over to you, Saleha.
Thank you so much, Hena. Today, we're here with Aisha Juman, who is the president of the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Aisha.
Thank you for inviting me, Salaha, and Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Mubarak, and it's our pleasure to have you on the show. So, of course, here today, we'd like to talk to you about a recent press release that was circulated regarding the crisis in Yemen, the ongoing humanitarian crisis, of course, and the potential role that the United States might be having currently to perpetuate this ongoing war in the region. And of course, beginning with recently, a press secretary from the Pentagon, as you might know, described the United States, revealed rather that the United States was providing maintenance to support Air Force belonging to Saudi Arabia. And we know that Saudi, of course, plays a critical role in the war in Yemen currently. So how and why, can you describe to us how and why is the United States authorizing contractors to provide service to Saudi warplanes, which is the situation right now? Why is that happening at this time?
Thank you for having me. This is something actually extremely troubling, especially in light of the Biden administration promised during the campaign trail that he's going to stop supporting the Saudi-led war on the Yemeni people. And then also after that, he also announced that he's not going to have any offensive support for the Saudi-led war. Although offensive is really not clearly defined, Congress had sent 2 requests up to date to ask the Biden administration to clarify what offensive is. I was actually quite upset when I read that they are still providing maintenance and spare parts for the Air Force. As we all know, the Air Force is an offensive military wear. They are not being used for defensive reasons. They have been used to target Yemen and carry airstrikes. Yemen has been under daily airstrikes since March 26, 2015. That's 6+ years. Every single day, there are airstrikes on the Yemeni people. So by continuing to provide them offensive wear, which is the maintenance of their Air Force, that 75% of it is actually American-made and American-supported, then the Biden administration had broken his promise to us and also broken what he said, that he has ordered the Pentagon to stop the offensive operation against the people of Yemen. The other issue with the Air Force is that they are using it also to enforce the blockade that they have on Yemen, which I actually call it a siege rather than just a blockade. Yemen air, land, and sea are controlled by Saudi Arabia and its allies, and it's making the largest humanitarian crisis in Yemen possible because they decide what gets into Yemen, when it gets into Yemen, and when choke it off completely, like they did with the fuel ships since January. So since January of this year, we're already in April, very few fuel ships were allowed to get into Yemen. They are held in Jizan, Saudi Arabia, and they can be held for over 200 days. We know of the ships that were waiting in Jizan to enter into Yemen, 3 of them had already left and gave up on trying to get into Yemen. And we also know that fuel is extremely important for every aspect of life in Yemen. We know many hospitals had closed, many health centers had closed, electricity, water systems, and even the, taking food that gets in from the port to the major cities, that also has been affected. The World Food Program chief said recently on his visit to Yemen in March that a child in Yemen dies every 75 seconds. Imagine that. So that's where we are, and that's why this continued assistance to offensive operation in Yemen is extremely unacceptable, and it just shows us that this administration is not being honest with us.
Wow, thank you so much for that insight and also a look into the difference between offensive and the idea of offensive and defensive. Of course, where a lot of articles right now or a lot of reports are saying that the lines really have been blurred in that regard. So we'll get a little bit into that later in our conversation today. During this time, of course, as you're describing, a lot of these warplanes are currently being used to fight in the war in Yemen. That has been confirmed. So with what the United States is doing, providing this service, however insignificant it might be or it might look, do you think that this role of theirs might conflict with their supposed role in being a quote-unquote impartial mediator in the Saudi-led war? How does this conflict with their supposed ability to, I guess, lessen the war?
So there are two things, and I don't think it's minimal. We know from Bruce Idol, who is at the Brookings Institute and has been working for the US government for 31 years, that the spare parts, for example, tires to these jets, they need to replace them every single day. So if they are not provided the tires, these jets will be grounded. So, it's not, the support is actually huge, not minimal. And in terms of the U.S., they have now an envoy, Tim Luther King, to Yemen. They are totally, since he's been in this position, we are actually very pleased with his the announcement that he will be a U.S. envoy to Yemen. What we've seen from him so far is that he is towing the Saudi line. He is completely not impartial. The US government is not impartial. This war started with an announcement from Washington, D.C. They've supported the Saudis from day one, and they continue to support the Saudi today. So that is very concerning to me as a Yemeni American, because then I understand that they are not impartial, that they're not going to be, getting into the parties, the one parties negotiating in good faith. We've heard multiple statements from Luther King, including his saying that there is no blockade in Yemen, which actually contradicts the facts. We haven't heard him say anything that's positive that indicates that he understands the situation in Yemen and that he is interested in pursuing peace in a just and inclusive manner. He's been asked by both Congress and the Senate. They had hearings, and in the hearings, they asked him about what support the U.S. is providing to the Saudis, and he said he doesn't know. That actually, again, another troubling sign that he's either not willing to say what he knows or that he doesn't know. And if he doesn't know, that's also another problem, because he is supposed to know everything that the U.S. government is doing in Yemen.
Of course.
So that's where we are with the negotiation.
Of course. Now, as you might, of course, be aware that President Biden has been in the headlines for a lot of similar reasons when it comes to international events. He recently announced a cap on the number of refugees being admitted into the country and into the United States. And now we're learning of this association with Yemen and supply and servicing war crafts at this time. If you could please try to describe to us how the Biden administration might currently be using the Yemeni population, the Yemeni people, to gain concessions from opposing parties in the region. How is this being done with these recent revelations that we're hearing about today?
Yeah, that's another troubling sign from this administration. And again, I actually, when he was elected, was quite happy because I felt that his administration was giving a very rare chance to correct the wrong that his administration, when he was with the Obama administration, did or inflicted on the Yemeni people. So the fact that they are still supporting the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen is very troubling. we'll continue to be engaged with them. We'll continue to monitor everything that they are doing to ensure that they don't go back. We know that both Congress and the Senate are very concerned about what the Biden administration is doing. And we're hoping that they do not go back on their promises. It's very difficult for me to understand also why they think that it's okay for them to use the Yemeni people as, I always call them, the Yemeni people have been used as a sacrificial lamb to please the Saudis. The Obama administration went into the war and supporting the Saudi war in Yemen because they wanted them to be happy about, or to forgive them about having the deal that they have struck with Iran. So I don't understand why, former President Obama felt that it was his right to sacrifice the Yemeni people. And we now are seeing very similar behavior from the Biden administration, where they're going now to have negotiation with the Iranians. I don't understand why they think it's okay again to use the Yemeni people as a bargaining chip in the regional conflict. The Yemeni people have nothing to do with the Iran deal and should not be used either as a bargaining chip or hostages to any negotiations. These negotiations, the Yemeni negotiations and the negotiations with Iran and America, need to be de-linked. The Yemeni people have nothing to do with it.
Of course, of course. And you spoke a little bit about this idea of hope in terms of when the new administration was sworn in. A lot of people, such as yourself, were looking for that sense of resolve and relief with new leadership coming in. And of course, we know that in various ways, Biden has been either praised or not regarding his accomplishments within the first 100 days in office. But unfortunately, how Yemen fits into these first 100 days, the recent news has been quite unfortunate for us to learn. Now, I do want to thank you for having gone into the difference between this idea of offensive versus defensive support, as that's a part of the equation that not many people might know about. But I also just wanted to go back from a very strategic or a political analyst perspective. Why do you think that the lines here have been blurred regarding whether support is offensive or defensive? And when it comes to the support of the U.S. government and how they are giving that service to Riyadh to carry out offensive bombing campaigns in Yemen, with these lines being blurred, what is their reasoning for that? And if we could just try to make sense of why this is happening now in his first 100 days in office.
To be honest, it's not logical. I don't think I can explain the behavior of this administration. I know that Congress had sent a letter to the administration to ask them to define what they consider offensive versus defensive, and they have not responded to that, despite the deadline that was in the letter had passed. They've sent again another letter asking that, especially after this report came out, with them maintaining the Air Force and also providing spare parts, which we all know is actually an offensive operation. So we're still waiting to hear from them. I don't understand why. Again, it seems to me that they are being extremely inaccurate. I don't want to say the word lying, but actually that's what it sounds like. They say one thing, but then we find something else. So they need to come clean and they need to explain that.
I agree. And thank you so much for all of that insight. Now, just in the remaining 60 seconds or so that we have left in our segment, 6 years into this conflict, around 230,000 people that have been killed in one of the world's most disturbing humanitarian crises. How does such U.S. involvement in such a secretive way, I would say, make worse or exacerbate the situation for these war-torn communities? Now, we're talking about the effects here on the ground and how local peoples are being affected. If you could just talk to us about that perspective in the remaining 1 minute or so that we have left.
Yeah. So Yemen is considered the largest humanitarian crisis and we have 16.2 million people who are one step away from famine. We have 400,000 Yemeni kids who are already in famine-like situations. And the U.S. is actually not secretively supporting the Saudi-led war on Yemen. They announced, as I said, the war was announced from Washington, D.C. under the Obama-Biden administration. The Trump administration was gleeing about its support for the Saudi war on Yemen. And by the way, I also want to include the United Arab Emirates because it's a strong partner to the Saudi war on Yemen. And then this administration comes and appears to be interested in doing the right thing. However, we have not seen any of that materialize. And so, again, I think it's up to us, the American public, to insist that this administration honors what they said that they want to do and end the support for the war that has created the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. That, the Biden administration just talked about how they want to acknowledge genocide. I think it's very important now to prevent genocide from happening, not just acknowledge genocide when it has happened, especially because they are participating in that.
Of course, well said. And we hope that genocide declaration will come soon. So today we've been here with Aisha Juman, who is the president of the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation. Aisha, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much for giving me a platform to speak to the community at large about what's going on in Yemen. I hope they continue to be engaged and demand that the administration stops supporting the war on Yemen.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And back to the newsroom with Hena Zuberi.
Thank you, Saleha. Before moving on to our next in-depth analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Walking up and down the world's largest refugee camps, I met Sister Fatima. Well, I'm calling her a sister. She was just a teenage girl, my granddaughter's age. Her parents were slaughtered by the Burmese military, and she was dragged by the Burmese soldiers to their hut, and all night long she was violated. She lost consciousness. When she regained, and in the morning and soldiers were themselves away, she ran and hid in a vegetable patch. Some people saw her, gave her clothes, and took her 4-day-long walk to Bangladesh. Who will speak up for her? Who will stand up for her if not you and I? It's our responsibility. It's our duty, brothers and sisters in humanity. And that's why I like you to support Burma Task Force. I'm a volunteer for it. But Burma Task Force is standing up to stop this genocide, violation of our sisters. You and I are free, they are not. Please stand up, work with Burma Task Force, and donate today to Burma Task Force. Together, we can do it. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome back. As we mentioned in the start of our show tonight, that we'll be talking in detail about the recent Human Rights Watch report accusing Israel of committing crimes of apartheid and persecution against Palestinians. Let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid for detailed analysis. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. What's happening in Israel and Palestine? B'Tselem, a respected human rights organization of Israel itself, in January this year called it apartheid. And it was President Carter who predicted that in 2006 in his book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And now Human Rights Watch has come up with an extensive report, and it is saying that Israel is using apartheid to subjugate Palestinians. It is calling not only at apartheid, but it's calling for sanctions against individuals who are responsible for it. And we will discuss that with Human Rights Watch. To discuss that with us is Louis Cherabon. He is Director of Human Rights Watch at the United Nations. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Louis.
Thanks for having me.
Why are you calling it apartheid?
That's actually a great question to begin with. Many Palestinian organizations have referred to it as apartheid for a very long time. As you said, B'Tselem came out in January with their own report. We have been following Israel and Palestine for 3 decades, watching it closely. And what we decided to do after so long in which people have been hoping that a peace process would eventually remove most, if not all, of the human rights abuses and the discrimination against the Palestinians, we decided that since things have kind of reached the point where it looks like the situation is essentially permanent. And so what we tried to do, instead of doing another report on settlements, on discrimination against the Palestinians, to connect the dots, to put together, decades of research that we have, and to do a legal analysis, to look at the definition of the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution, and to see whether actually what Israel is doing in the occupied Palestinian territories constitutes or would qualify as crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. What we found is that they clearly do. And so what we're calling on the international community is to stop talking about as if apartheid is just around the corner, or if the Israeli government doesn't do X, Y, and Z, then it will become an apartheid situation. We're saying that they've crossed the threshold. It's already here. And now the question is, what are we going to do about it? And as we said, this is something, we're not saying that, the Israeli people are doing this, or certainly not that this is something that is being committed by Jews. This is something that individuals, Israeli officials, Israeli authorities are responsible for. So we are calling for targeted sanctions against individuals who are responsible for these crimes. We are calling on UN member states to set up a commission of inquiry to look into what we and others have found over decades into the question of apartheid. And we're also calling for the UN to set up or appoint a special envoy for the crimes of apartheid and persecution, and to look at implementing the recommendations that we have. And so what we're also looking for the UN member states to set up an apartheid commission, a committee actually to look at how whatever recommendations that the Commission of Inquiry comes up with, whatever recommendations that the Special Envoy on the crimes of apartheid and persecution comes up with can be implemented. So we're really calling on all parts of the United Nations system, but also the international community to come together to put pressure on the Israeli authorities to put an end to these crimes. Our goal here is to put an end to a discriminatory situation where you have roughly the same size populations of Israelis and Palestinians, but with two completely different sets of rights. As you said, there are many people who over the years have said that this looks like apartheid. And there's an old saying that we have: if it looks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it probably is a duck. And so we're saying that the situation here is apartheid, and it's time to call it what it is.
Well, ducks are far more innocent than what I see here. You sound like, Louis, as though you're saying individuals are responsible, but you didn't say that is the Israeli state policy.
No, absolutely. We are saying that this is the state policy. This is a government policy. But when we talk about getting the ICC involved, it's individuals who are responsible for crimes, and we're talking about individual responsibility. But it is very much a state policy. But this state policy is driven by individuals who are responsible for implementing it. So this is the government, these are the authorities, but as always, governments and authorities are made up of individuals. And so absolutely, yes.
So how is the Israeli apartheid resembles the South African apartheid?
Well, we're actually not trying to look at this in terms of a comparison with South Africa. The experience of South Africa really highlighted this crime, and forced people to look at it. But what we're doing is we're looking at it as a legal term, right? And let's break it down here. There are three essential elements of apartheid. First, there's an intent to maintain domination by one racial group over another. And race has interpreted in a much broader sense. We're not just talking, obviously, about skin color, but it can be nationality, where you're descended from, your ethnic origin. The second element is a context of systematic oppression by the dominant group over the marginalized group. And then the third is inhumane acts being committed by that dominant group. And I think that going back to the question that you initially asked about why now are we coming out with this? And I think it took a while to establish this question of intent to maintain domination. And now we feel that we have all three elements of the crime of apartheid and persecution. And so this is what we're talking about. Really not saying, this is another South Africa. This is a different situation with its own unique characteristics, but we are saying that this very serious crime against humanity, which is an international crime that is defined clearly by the Rome Statute to the International Criminal Court, There's also the 1973 International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid. So we think that we have all the ingredients here, or not that we think we have found strong evidence for it. And we would like now the United Nations and United Nations member states to step in and do their part as well.
Louis, I understand you're defining why now, but was situation any different 5 years ago than what it is now? So I'm struggling with why now issue. Would you elaborate how, dots which you have connected now, why were they not connecting 5 years ago?
Right. I mean, this is certainly not something that we came to overnight, right? This report was years in the making, and it's 213 pages, which for a report by a non-governmental group, a human rights group like ours, that's really that's a lot of pages. This is a book-length report, and there's a lot of evidence, and so we had to gather the evidence. We had to look at it from all sides to consider the pros and cons, to really look at the evidence with a skeptical eye, to question ourselves. So this is an important moment in a long journey for Human Rights Watch, and we're just joining a conversation. It often happens that it takes us a while to gather evidence. We don't make allegations like this lightly. We don't wake up one morning and decide, okay, we're going to say that the Israeli authorities are committing the crimes of apartheid and persecution. It's something that really takes a lot of evidence gathering, a lot of discussions with other NGOs, with legal experts, talking with victims. We also tried to speak with Israeli authorities. We actually gave them nearly a year to respond to a set of questions that we had. We sent them to Prime Minister Netanyahu's office 11 months ago. He never responded. So we wanted, before we made this very serious allegation, to make sure that we had everything in order, that we had checked every box. And we were going to come out with what we felt was a slam dunk case. And that took a long time to prepare. Yes, it's a fair question to ask. Why did it take so long? But the important thing is that it's here, and that we're entering into this conversation and trying to push it forward. We weren't the first to do it, and we don't believe we will be the last to say this. More and more people have been using the word apartheid, or the A word, as people often call it. And I think it's going to be used more and more. And hopefully we can contribute to the fact that people won't be afraid to say it for fear of being accused of being, anti-Semitic, or some of the other things that are the unfair and non-substantive criticisms of us and others who have made similar claims.
One interesting aspect of your report is that you are asking the Palestinian Authority itself to stop cooperation with Israel, which is leading to apartheid. How they are involved and how they can stop.
Yes, this is an interesting question, and we will see. I think that this is something that they're going to have to think about, and we have a lot of recommendations that are going to take some time to implement. But it's very important that everyone stop doing things that can enable the continuation of apartheid. We've long said that the settlements in Palestinian territory are illegal, and we have called on governments and companies to make sure that they're not doing anything that contributes to the commission of crimes that enables them. And so certainly the Palestinian Authority is going to have to do its bit too. And this isn't something that they haven't been thinking about on their side as well, I would imagine. I think that these are things that they've also been thinking long and hard about.
Look, you emphasize thorough documentation in connecting dots. And you mentioned that you sent 11 months ago to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they never responded to it. Is there anyone in Israeli government who responded to Human Rights Watch about your questions?
I think that we've had individual conversations. I'm not sure if it's that absolutely no one responded, but certainly there's unofficial discussions, but then there's official responses, and we needed an official response. The Israeli government has long accused Human Rights Watch of being anti-Israeli, and this is simply not true. I'm a U.S. citizen, and part of my job is to raise concerns about the United States. That doesn't make me anti-American or anti-United States. It's just something that we do. We expect governments to behave responsibly, to hold themselves accountable if they're committing crimes or engaging in abuses or discrimination, that they will take steps to stop it. And the Israeli government is no different. They don't get a pass. They shouldn't be immune from criticism. So we need an official response. And certainly we've had discussions with Israeli diplomats and officials over the years, but the conversation has become difficult. And I should add that Israel expelled my colleague, Omar Shakir, who is our Israel-Palestine director, 2 years ago, accusing him falsely of supporting the BDS, the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement. We at Human Rights Watch, we don't support boycotts. We don't oppose them either. It's a free speech thing. People are free to advocate for what they want in terms of boycotts around the world, whether it's in the United States or elsewhere, but we don't. It's not our position. But they kicked him out, which was a clear signal from the Israeli side about kind of ending the conversation to a certain degree. They said that it was only about Omar and their false allegations against him, but it's quite clear that it was about Human Rights Watch's criticism of Israel. And I should add that we also criticize the Palestinians. We criticize Hamas. We've also criticized Hezbollah. We've called out the Palestinian Authority and Hamas for abusive behavior on their part, for shooting rockets indiscriminately at the Israelis. I mean, we're calling everyone out when they deserve it. We're not singling anyone out.
So, what impact do you reasonably expect in the United States? Because United States is engaging once again with the world arena, European Union on different issues, with the United Nations, the Joint World Health Organization. So US is not going to be isolated on this. So far, they have distanced themselves from your report. I don't know why there was a need, because it's not a report of the US government to distance it from its. What do you expect from the US government in this regard?
Well, I think this is one of those issues where we're well aware of the difficult political environment. We're not expecting the world to change overnight because of this one report. We're making a contribution to a conversation that have been going on for a long time and will continue to go on. We would like the United States to first look at the report, take it seriously, and think about it, and to recognize that this isn't some fly-by-night thing or some sudden thing that we slap together at the last minute, that this is a carefully prepared document that lays out what we consider to be, a very, very strong case. And then to use their influence on the Israeli government to put an end to these crimes. They can change it. They can help change it. We're also hoping that the UN Secretary General and that others will do their part to further the conversation and to push things forward. But we're hoping that we can go step by step and change things and make the lives of Palestinians better. We're not expecting the U.S. government to change overnight, but we do hope that they'll listen to us. The first step for any kind of important change is acknowledging the problem, is analyzing it and seeing where there's a need for change. This is what we're hoping we can do. Our recommendations won't necessarily be implemented, this week or next month or even this year. But we hope that over time, we and others who are part of the human rights movement will make sure that eventually things change. The sooner the better. But we're not going to stop, and we're not going to keep quiet about this. This is the beginning of a new phase of our advocacy on Israel and Palestine, and it's a long-term project. We have short, medium, and long-term parts of it. In the short term, we want people to understand the report. In the medium term, we want to start moving things along in terms of getting governments to take steps to put pressure on the Israeli government to end the crimes. And over the long term, we want change that will, really realize the rights of the Palestinians, that will ensure that Israel is able to end these crimes, while also ensuring that it's able to live in peace and security. So these are big goals, but we're at the beginning of a long journey.
Thank you so much, Louis Charbonneau. Thank you so much for your conversation. Louis Charbonneau is the director of Human Rights Watch at the United Nations. Back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Keep watching Muslim Network TV. For more, visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.
Special thanks to our official supporter, Zagat Foundation of America.